there's no way we're going to ever achieve and have kind of a milestone or a bench post to say, like, here's where we're going, and here's now how we get here. We can come up with an actual plan for what that looks like.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Wholster Real Estate Wholesaling podcast. We are here today with a great friend of mine, just a fantastic human, Travis Lauchman of Lauchman Real Estate. How are you, Travis?
Doing wonderful, sir. Thank you for having me on.
You're looking good. I like the beard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This new addition. My wife is pass.
Give you the pass.
I ask her opinion.
Yeah.
And like, yo, just that's the max length. Don't go beyond that, and we're good.
Okay. Yeah, it's getting cold. You got to keep it warm. The face, you can get dry.
I've heard all of these health benefits, so I'm in, man.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm a little lazy when it comes to hair care.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
This is my way of getting away with it.
Well, I'm jealous because I wish I could grow a beard. All I can do is this little goatee. The rest
that looks good.
The rest of it doesn't come in too well. But hey, thanks for coming out, man. It's going to be exciting to talk to you. I know we probably talk a couple times a week about real estate, and to get you on here and pass on our fun conversations to others, I think is going to be a good time. So
right on, man. And it is a pleasure. Plus we have both active transactions, and we have just kind of day-to-day future investment stuff we chat about. So
yeah,
all sorts of plans.
Yeah. So to give a little background to you guys, Travis is a real estate investor. He is a real estate agent. We've worked together on a lot of projects. We've done some wholesaling together. He does some project management for me. He sells a lot of my projects. And he does a ton of stuff on his own. He's very, very much in the real estate investment world. So, tons of knowledge coming out of this guy for sure.
I appreciate that. Tons of people to thank, along the way, and as I got started and going, and maybe I can relay how that whole journey began.
Yeah,
briefly.
Let's hear about how you got started and where you're at today.
Cool, man. So, the way I started, I was working in finance for a solar energy company. I moved to Baltimore City from DC, and because my wife was going to Towson to become a teacher.
Okay.
So that was the catalyst to moving up to Baltimore. And when I was working in that company, it was became a big company. They publicly traded, and it was a lot of desk hours, and there was kind of a corporate path, but I just realized it wasn't for me, trying to climb the ladder. I just, I think you can do it with enough effort, mm-hmm. but I just didn't. I kind of lost interest in doing it after putting in, a couple years of a ton of hours.
Common story for real estate investors.
Common story, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those people that have issues with authority.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't because I needed it done my way. It was just this, if you look forward 25 years, is this where you want your life to go?
Right.
And I just was getting so bored sitting.
Uh-huh.
And the solar people are awesome. I love them, and I love that industry. That specific role didn't fit. Wasn't great for me. So anyway, a company called Charm City Builders, local developer here, well-known, well-marketed, was starting renovation on a house next door to me where I was renting in Federal Hill. And at that time, I had just started getting into Bigger Pockets and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and kind of the basic journey of real estate information and getting the wheels churning as far as what could be possible if we developed income on our own, and could we do this? And Tyler Banks and Brooke Kane at that time owned that company, both of whom I know as well.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Know well, and
talked to Brooke this morning, actually.
There you go. And so they had a really cool article right up in the Baltimore Sun, And I was like, these guys are so legit. I can't believe they're doing a house next door to me. Let me just throw my name in the hat and just see like if they're willing to allow me to shadow, work for free, whatever. So I wrote up this, well-crafted email to them. And I was just basically a cold email saying, hey, I'm really interested in real estate. Here's what I've done in the past. I don't know if there's any opportunities with you guys, but I'd love to learn anything and help in any way I can. And I'm happy to do it for free.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of, it happened to be the case that they were looking to process and build some systems. And, after they said yes, they responded, we met, and it was really, we kind of all hit it off together those first couple meetings. And then maybe a few months later, after that trial phase, which was good for, I think, both parties there at that time, they were like, hey, just like whenever you're ready, you can come work for us. And so that ended up being my first foray. And it was amazing, like to learn from two seasoned investors, both of whom I respect tremendously, and two guys who are willing to share, so much information with you, very selfless guys and dudes who like have been through a lot of ups and downs in their careers. And for someone like me who doesn't inherently take risks, so beneficial, right? To like see it happening, unfolding in front of you,
right,
and learn. And then as the time comes, like grow more confidence and then finally be willing to take those risks yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking eventually you worked yourself into a paying position.
Yeah. So I joined them as like a W-2 employee.
Oh, great.
And I think at the very beginning of 2014, and worked in that capacity as sort of like a director of sales and acquisitions, but really kind of doing all sorts of different things. And I liked being a Swiss Army knife because I got to learn so many spots in the business, like between construction, and I was doing like historic chap credits, a local Baltimore thing for historic homes. And then I picked up the real estate license with the idea that, hey, if we sell the stuff that we're building, or own, we don't need to pay another agent 2.5% each time. Like I can do it in-house for a much smaller fee, almost build it into the salary or whatever it was. So that was just something that happened organically, and affiliated with a brokerage locally called Cummings & Co. Realtors. Dave Cummings is the owner of that. And again, just through the limited network I had, he was someone I was told, hey, you speak with this guy. And what a great thing that's been too, man. Dave is just such a wonderful guy, very sharp. And the way that he has his business model, it's not like a hands-on, like a Keller Williams or one of these big brokerages. It's just kind of run your own show, and I'm here for support. And they've got like just a great team of agents there now. And they've grown like, man, tremendously even in 5 years.
Yeah, they have exploded.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
It's just so cool to see. I think there's 600-ish agents there now.
That's huge. Good for them.
Yeah. They're doing great. And I think like maybe the number one market share in the city and maybe 2 in the county. They're like constantly vying for 1 and 2 now, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Given that it's still like a boutique shop.
That's really great. Good for them.
Yeah.
So you managed to get yourself into a position where you could learn a ton, basically get paid to do it.
Yeah, man. And I think that's absolutely the case, and that's kind of how it turned out. And of course, the flip side of that is I'm also obviously sacrificing the time too, right? Like anything they wanted me to do, I'm jumping on it.
Yeah.
So I think that approach worked well for me, because both sides were willing to play ball. They were willing to share information, and I was willing to do whatever was asked.
Soak it up like a sponge. Do it
man.
all.
Do it all.
Yeah.
Do it all. And got to meet a lot of good contractors, like people on the way, wholesalers, who ultimately, just through interactions and deciding how to be once we're in business, those things can carry forward. So like the way you approach people in any position, wherever you are, I think it's critical to consider how you want to build relationships, because then again, they may come around in a year or two and you want them to remember those interactions being positive, ideally, or at least, if nothing else, fair, right? Like honorable and fair.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's really great that you were able to do that. And a lot of people have asked me, how do I get into this business? I got a job I don't really like. I want to get into real estate. I don't know how to do it. And what you've done isn't necessarily easy, but you put yourself out there, right? You looked for the opportunity where you could get into the business and make some money, but learn a ton from people that are experienced. And I think that's a really, really good way to do it. I know guys that have been like, hey, I'm going to come work for you just like you did, and I'm going to do it for free, and I'm just going to figure out how to provide the value. And sometimes you can just create that position for yourself. And it's just such a wonderful way to get into the business and start learning it in a way that you can get paid and leave your corporate job that you probably don't like in the first place. And then the next step is, okay, how can I take this piece, take what I've learned, the relationships I've built, and start moving that into something that can then replace that income.
Totally, man. And one quick last note I'll mention about that, just because I think it's relevant for people who are considering it.
Okay.
It was like a lot of folks, and I think some of my family members included, when I mentioned I was even considering this, they were like, "Don't do it, don't do it." They like, dude. And I remember when I was telling, like, I had a good relationship with the people I was working with in the previous company.
Yeah.
And the lady was like, "Are you sure? Like, that's a really small company. Like, you know what you're doing." And it definitely took some courage. I had my first kid was like,
oh yeah,
like we were expecting our first kid, and I was like, man, I'm taking a step backwards from a salary standpoint, but like enjoy, as far as how much fun that I think this could be, and the future rewards. Like it became worth it, and my mind went to, if I don't do it now, like it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like I have this kid. It gets that much harder. You want stability. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that for people who might be thinking about it.
It's a great point. It takes a lot of courage, and you're going to get a lot of naysayers.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And if we did it, we'd be in the same spot as like, the general rest of the population. And again, there's nothing wrong with choosing that. But if you don't want it, then you have to have the courage to choose something else.
Right.
And go for it. Just give it a shot.
Exactly. So let's pick up there. So you've been working for Charm City for a bit, and what was the next step for you?
So learned a ton, got to experience like so many different facets of real estate through just my interaction with Charm City, which at that time they were flipping 30 to 40 houses, like full gut renovations a year, generally in the harbor neighborhoods of Baltimore, Fells Point, Federal Hill, Canton. And then we started realizing, so we were kind of coming up as a construction squad, and started realizing, hey, this marketing thing we're pretty good at. And Tyler Banks is a naturally gifted marketer and just has like a mindset that is constantly marketing and like really good with building relationships. And so that was his strength. And he realized, I think, construction wasn't his favorite thing to deal with. So we shifted gears as we were going along, like organically, into more of a marketing company. And at that time got into some wholesaling.
Okay.
So started to get an understanding for how to do that and build some systems around that, some softwares, a couple CRMs that helped us out. And then finally, as we were going along, the company started kind of paring down a little bit in like around 2018. And so we started with kind of the blessing from the people I worked for and just open communication, I started doing some projects on the side on my own.
Okay.
So I actually bought one of the places that Charm City had under contract as my first rental, and paid like a agreed on wholesale fee and did that whole thing. And that kind of kicked off the thought process for rental properties. And then eventually, with a couple more years, me and Tyler ended up doing some partnership on a bunch of different properties later, where we built a small rental portfolio and flipped a bunch in 20 and 21. And then this year we wrapped up, or in 22, we wrapped up a bunch of those, just taking advantage of the marketplace.
Yeah, the 20 to 22 marketplace in Baltimore, but the nation as a whole, I think, has been interesting to say the least. Just really hot markets. I kind of went the same route as you and took advantage of some of those situations myself and downsized a bit of what I had, because it's just a great time to do it.
Yeah, totally, man. Like, just unbelievable. I mean, it was one of those times when we're flipping homes that it almost didn't matter what you were putting on the market. You just had to get it out there,
right?
Within that time frame. And the time frame wasn't small. It was like 18 months,
Yeah.
2 years almost, where you could just, and you don't want to put out junk, but at that time it was incredible. People were buying houses with no inspections. They were going above ask price. There was all these, you remember the appraisal contingencies in normal times. They're like, we're either going to waive it or we'll pay, up to $20,000 more than the appraisal.
Right.
Like, it was bonkers stuff, man.
Yeah, it was. I think we sold a couple in a certain neighborhood that each time we sold one, it was the new neighborhood record.
The new record.
Yeah.
It's more for sure, man.
And then I think one of the last ones we sold was a record, and it was a cash investment purchase.
That's right.
So that's
right.
Wild times for sure.
Yeah, when you think about owning that house, and maybe you bought it 4 to 5 years prior to that, and you can start considering the number you purchased it for. It leaves you under, like, I always think, are we, someone who wants to buy and hold property, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around how you can buy something for cash at that number.
Yeah.
It makes you go, who is this? What's their strategy, and how are they willing to pay this amount? Then again, you had a 2 to 3% interest rate.
Yes, the interest rates were different. Additionally, when the market and the opportunities dry up like that, cash just needs to find a home.
True.
So
yeah,
that stuff tends to happen. But yeah, it was a wild market. And then I think as all this was going on, you and I were having a lot of conversations about, looking at the market, looking at what we had, and talking about this idea of doing more with less. Do you want to talk about your mindset there?
Sure. Yeah. So that's always been, I think, so the doing more with less is I see it as both a strength and a weakness, I think. And I'm talking about myself when I think about this. And a lot of it is the idea that, especially coming from a place of being a jack of all trades and just problem solving and sort of like figuring out how to operate nimbly, you just tackle any challenge that comes across your desk. Emails, you're just like jumping on everything. So you're dealing with marketing and accounting and sales and the whole 9 yards. So when we learn how to do this, oftentimes it's a good thing in the sense that we have the knowledge and the capability to handle almost anything that comes across our desk from a real estate standpoint, once we understand the basic system, right? So we can operate in any of those places. The constraint becomes time. And like, if you we've talked about this in the past offline, if you don't leverage your time and put other people who are as skilled and likely more so, ideally in those positions, you're constrained only to what you yourself can do, and we all have the same number of hours in the day and probably other ways we'd like to spend them than just working away, plugging away.
Right.
So, I look at it from a sense of 2020 came around and COVID hit. And for me, it was like a great time to buckle down and look at all the systems that I operate in and say, can I continue in this way? And at that time, it felt very uncertain. It was like no one knew what was going to happen in the next few months after that March, April. And I think, frankly, like definitely it was a shock to me that the direction it went was just like a match and some gasoline. Like I thought it was going to go the opposite way.
Yeah, me too.
Freaking wild, man. So anyway, I think like ultimately it has become a great strength to understand multiple facets and really entrench and take the time needed to learn, because I'm confident enough that if I wanted to scale back and just be a sole operator, I have the capacity to do that. And that's kind of where I've been. And on the flip side, I think it is important to find, and it could be via VAs or it could be just building out systems efficiencies via software, but figuring out ways where you are your own bottleneck and then removing that constraint so that you can grow a little bit.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, man. And now I think might be another one of those times to look, almost do like an internal audit and see what kind of where you're not being nimble and where you're maybe spending a lot of time that doesn't return a lot of cash, and kind of reconsider. And also like even places that you're spending money that aren't a good return, which might be a good time to consider from a marketing perspective, like how we come about acquiring these deals or get these opportunities in front of us.
Right. To that point, what type of marketing are you doing in your business?
So a few different channels, and one of which is pay-per-click on Google, which is basically just like someone searches geographically in Baltimore and surrounding areas, like a keyword search, sell my home Baltimore. And those first three hits that come up are ads, and you can see them highlighted before you get to the end search results.
Right.
So that's one way I market, and then folks will find me and fill out a web form or make a phone call.
So you're one of those ads.
I'm one of those ads.
Got it.
Yeah. I'm one of those 3 ads typically. And again, it's like based on where the search originates, which is linked to an IP address. And that is operated by a company called GeoFlip. So that's all third party. I just essentially have another company manage that entire ad campaign. And I've been doing that for a couple years, and it's worked well. It's just a good, consistent way for me to get a few leads a week and kind of keep the churn going. And to that point, like that we were talking about earlier, it's something I've considered. Like, I've considered outsourcing the phone calls and all these things. But I think another way to think about when we're doing this is to consider like what's at the top of the funnel and sort of what's the first domino that falls, and it's the marketing.
Right.
And I definitely learned that from like Tyler and Brooke. If you don't have marketing going, nothing else is going to happen.
Right.
Like you have to get opportunities to get the business rolling. So it doesn't, it's a little scary when you start because there's a monthly payment involved and all these things. And for me, that was important because I take it seriously. Like a phone call or a lead comes in, like I'm pretty much dropping, to the extent I can, everything that's going on and kind of tackling that right away.
Right. Yeah. And there's a level of commitment there. You can't just put in a month, right? You got to commit to the consistency to see the results.
For sure, for sure. And like some months are duds, you know, and they're frustrating. But then the next month, you know, it all ultimately equals out. And I think it's also important, and I haven't been the best at this, but to measure, you know, to figure out how you can measure those campaigns. You know, a lot of people use the word like the KPI
KPIs,
acronym,
yep.
you know, and just understanding like what are the variables that by which if I accomplish these things, I will be successful. How many leads does it take to get an appointment? How many appointments for an offer? How many offers for a deal? How many deals to reach the income level you want? And then you could just kind of work backwards and say, okay, well, I need 20 leads a month to get myself 2 deals, like whatever it might be.
Right. And that can help you sort of dial in what your cost is per deal as well, and make sure that when you do a deal, there's not only room for you to make a profit, but room for you to cover your costs that it took to get the deal.
For sure, for sure. And if you are measuring, and maybe you've got a couple different marketing channels going, so for instance, pay-per-click, you know, you might have a marketing campaign that's just direct mail. You know, a lot of folks are doing different things, texts, messages. So then if you understand how many leads it takes and understand the cost per lead, well, then you can basically look apples to apples across the campaigns and say, well, this one's kicking this one's butt. Like, let's dial that one up,
right,
and see how that goes.
Right.
So that's super helpful too, and I think probably for any business, like pretty important to have those basics understood.
Yeah, I think if you're not in tune with the money side of your marketing, you're just kind of doing things willy-nilly, and that can produce results, but it's not effective.
Right.
And you have no way to really control things.
Yeah, and it's a constant like give and take, because you want to grow, and you know there's only so much time you can spend like crunching numbers, you know. But if you were able to set up something simple, it doesn't have to be like 100% accurate. I think if you can get very close to understanding where your monthly is,
right,
and not kill yourself over it, but have a good understanding that here's my monthly spend, here's how much it's going to take to cover it, and based on my exit strategy, you know, whether that's wholesale or rental or flip, here's how many deals I need to kind of break even.
Right. Yeah. Some kind of idea is what you want. And the discipline to be consistent.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we talk a lot about discipline. I mean, a lot of this business is discipline. And since there's so many different ways to get distracted with new shiny ways to make a buck, having that discipline to stick with something, even when you have those months where, oh man, I didn't get a deal, or this thing I tried, it didn't work out. Sometimes if you just stick with it, you'll find that the benefits will come.
Right. Totally. And to the discipline point, like there are so many different strategies in real estate, even amongst your peers as you're kind of coming up, and you start realizing, man, there's so many things I think for guys that are interested in this business that seem like maybe they're performing better than what you are currently doing. However, like if you're committed to whatever niche that you've selected, and you've got like several months involved, a couple years, whatever it is, oftentimes, like I think it makes more sense to master it, you know, especially if you're well on the way,
right?
And dive deep and become really good at it. And ideally, once you do that and kind of spend the time, it'll create the dividends later where you can explore more and or maybe like add a different asset class. And
sure,
you know, I've had the opportunity again with some of the relationships that I've had to like try with industrial property and then some small multifamily stuff. And these things, they seem, you know, you're jumping from single family residential into this other asset class. There's a lot of different nuances, obviously, and you need to have the right team around you, but it's achievable. You know, it's like it's kind of like the mental constraints we put on ourselves and the network we have to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. It looks pretty good. As a third party, someone who's in my corner, could you help me evaluate this?
Right.
You know. So I think that's all real accurate, and just sticking to something for a while is hard in this world that we live in now. Even like finishing an email without getting interrupted is freaking tough. So like there's days when I think I've sent something and I think it's happened to me and you, and I've been like, dude, I thought I hit that button and there it is in the window. It's been there for 8 hours.
Yep.
Like,
I've done that.
so yeah, I think we all have at this point. So yeah, man, figuring out ways to block some time for staying on task, you know, and trying to finish things that we start is important.
Right. So one thing I want to talk about with you is that transition. I kind of alluded to it earlier. The transition from replacing the W-2, the job, right? Getting into the business, getting paid for it, and then finding the next step. And that step being passive income, filling that, let's call it bucket, to replace that working income with passive income. And what is passive income? And what are the different ways that can look like? And how passive is real estate income, right? Because it's not, I think most people think that it's very passive, but it's not quite as passive as people think it is.
Yeah, totally, man. So yeah, great call. And I think that's so important. And one thing you and I have talked about again in the past is just getting clear on what we want. Because if we can't do that, then there's no way we're going to ever achieve and have kind of a milestone or a bench post to say, like, here's where we're going. And here's now how we get here. We can come up with an actual plan for what that looks like. So to your point, you know, the first question is like, all right, I'm in this job, W-2 job, corporate, whatever it might be. And if I'm not loving it, how do I get out of that job? Well, you just have to replace doesn't even have to be that current income, but you have to replace your expense, whatever your expenses are. So if you spend $5,000 a month between rent, gas, groceries, blah, blah, you got to figure out a way, you know, to have a little savings and then cover that. And then you can take a risk, right? Or maybe you find a job that enables you to cover. Next piece, right? So now that corporate, the day-to-day expenses are covered and that bucket is full. And now you go, okay, what would it be like? What would I have to do if I could now look at those day-to-day, that bucket that I'm working 9 to 5 for, still working in some capacity for like either yourself or another company, and have that bucket filled up via real estate investments, whether that's your own buy and hold properties, syndications, you know, all these different channels and avenues. And to your great point, what is passive? How many, like what kind of asset classes are truly passive? Well, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but you know, at one point, I think I had maybe with my partner and then on my own, 20-ish, you know, 20 to 25 units. And we went through several managers, property managers, and, you know, it was partly our own issues with like the learning curve and how to operate in those relationships. But today I'm down to maybe 10 on my own. And, you know, to the point it's, I don't get like blasted, but it's definitely several hours still a week that I'm putting in. So it's not zero is my point.
Right.
And in order for you to operate any business well, you want to build the systems around it. There's always a way to solve it. Like you can hire a manager, but then you're entrusting that entire piece to a manager, right? So like, as long as that trust is there and you're somehow keeping track and still staying responsible, I think that was the key lesson I learned with the manager before. I was like, I can focus on my flips and my active income, and hey, manager, you got the rest, like this stuff. And I removed my own responsibility from the equation. And then the next time I looked, I was like, dude, what happened here? Like, the house is crushed. We got these terrible tenants. Like, I'm rehabbing this to resell it like I would like a gut,
Yeah.
So sometimes you learn the hard way, and just hope that you can stay in business and then change up quick before it happens again.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to manage the managers. Like, people forget that
man.
sometimes. I've had...
Yeah. And dude, maybe you find a great one that you don't need to, but you got to watch it for a little while at least.
Right. Yeah, we all hope that's the case. They're hard to find, though.
They are. Well, it's a tough business.
It's a very tough business.
That property management.
Mm-hmm. It's a very tough business.
Yeah.
Thin margins.
You kind of have to... Thin margins. That's it. And like, I think about that one personally, is like, you kind of have to get to 100-ish units before you hire someone, because you're maybe making 8 to 10% of rent.
Right.
And that might be $100 a unit. So, if you're that guy operating that business, are you the guy answering all the calls? Are you the dude doing all the maintenance? Like, what do you...
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's a hard one, man.
Yeah.
But with that said, back to our passive bucket, like, I think you come up with your goal to figure out how much, what monthly income are you looking for? You figure out an asset class. And for me, it was like just natural to find stuff that was easy for me to get to, because I think there's a lot of opportunities still in and around where I live in Baltimore, and then kind of work backwards from there and just say, okay, if I stay with these single family properties, how many is it going to take, at the level that we're pursuing them? And, I think that goal can change. And for me, it's gone from like, I'd rather have fewer, kind of larger assets, condensed. So the same rationale that a lot of people have with multifamily or whatever asset class, like maybe you want to drop 1 to 2 million into a small multifamily rather than having 7, 8, or 9 single family properties. And that's definitely becoming more attractive as I'm kind of progressing here.
I feel the same way, and I think that ties in nicely to the overall theme here: do more with less.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly, mate. Yep. And just like anyone who's kind of looked into this isn't new information at all, but like small multifamily, you have 20 units, they're all 1 bed, 1 bath, they're all laid out the same, they have 1 roof, all have the same exact infrastructure. 20 houses, on the other hand, 20 different layouts, 20 different, completely different HVAC systems, and like the whole thing.
Yep. So
especially if you're a small business, it's really nice to have those levels of understanding and scale, and then go, hey, we can, this is still 1 building. It's not 20 buildings. It's 1 place.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And as I'm kind of in the same boat as you, I've owned a portfolio of single families, and I found that multifamily, owning less of those single buildings and more units themselves has been a big change.
Yeah. And frankly, I need to practice what I preach, but because I still I've owned a few small multifamilies, and it's definitely a bigger goal for me this year, in 23. And one thing that has happened to me is like, we get so involved and invested in our marketing system that what shows up easily and kind of naturally now is single family property. So I don't want to abandon that channel, and I'm just kind of like thinking out loud here. Like, I don't want to abandon that because that's the business I've built. However, you have, like, if I want it to change, I have to make some changes to the system, because it's built in a way that right now those things are still real valuable to me.
Right.
So I need to have, it has to be very intentional is my point.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Travis, what are your goals for the rest of the year? What do you see yourself doing?
Well, I'm looking to do 12 to 15 flips One-ish a month is a good level for me, and got there last year. I think there's still enough, and kind of the way I operate is houses that are like generally 350,000 and under as an ARV.
Okay.
And just for me personally, like in the construction I do, I think that's safer for kind of the level of finish and the model that I have. So that's certainly a goal. Keep the marketing going, and then this year to the passive bucket, I want to get that thing a lot more full. So I am seeking now and kind of clarifying myself, like, what does that look like from a $1 to $2 million asset? And I'm kind of toying with a few different asset classes in real estate, multifamily be one of them, and then a small multifamily. And then I've actually just recently started looking at like small neighborhood centers, which is kind of a weird, something that not a lot of people talk about.
Like shopping centers?
Yeah, sort of like strip malls, but say they're the way I'm looking at this is like maybe like 5 to 10 tenant situations that aren't anchored by like a huge grocery store.
Okay.
So it would be like, a liquor store and a tax accountant and like a dog groomer or whatever. But things that, whether there's an economic downturn or not, haircuts, like people are going to,
right.
And it's something I've just started learning about, but I'm pretty interested in because it doesn't seem quite as saturated and competitive at this very moment, in comparison with like multifamily and a few, mobile home parks have blown up and self-storage. So anyway, it might be something that I'll get into here in the next 6 to 8 months.
Great. Well, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, man. Well, and look, if I don't, life goes on.
Life goes on. There's a lot of other different ways to, expand your business.
Right. Yeah. And dude, one other thing on the expansion, just that I want to mention.
What you got?
Like, it's also okay to like be good with where you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and I say that because I think we all, as like in our culture, we're like, oh, well, you did 12 last year. Like, why don't you want to do 20? Like, why don't you want to double? Like, well, because I have 3 kids and I'm trying to raise a family too, and like not get kicked out of my household.
It's so important to realize that you can't give it all up to work. Right. I mean, you can, yes. You certainly can, but there's a cost to that. And not everyone has the same sort of situation, but something is going to cost you. There will be something to break along the way. Right. So taking time for yourself, taking time for your family, recharging, spending, time on your relationships, all that stuff is so important. And personally, I think is the most important thing. So, I think you got a great mindset.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. That's exactly, I feel the same way. Like, that's why we started this.
Right.
That's why we decided to go into this business, so we could develop freedom and not have to work till we're 60,
right.
Behind a desk.
Right.
So that's the whole thing for me. And that's kind of what keeps me grounded and getting after it, with the hopes of creating more time freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, you're absolutely crushing it. We appreciate you coming on, Travis. I value our friendship a lot, and I'm glad that you're here with us chatting. And is there any way that people can reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me, Jared. It's a complete pleasure to chat with
absolutely.
You on and offline at any time. So thank you. And we can, if anyone's interested in chatting, I'm on Instagram, just at Lauchman RE, and Facebook, and like website. So hit me up if you guys have any questions around construction or flipping houses, or if there's anything I can do to help. Happy to chat.
Awesome, Travis. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes for everybody. And thanks again for coming on. I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
My pleasure, man. See you soon, Jared.
See you, Travis. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Wholster Podcast. If you want to stand out with your wholesale marketing or easily find more off-market deals, Leverage the convenience of a mobile app and download Wholster today on the App Store or the Google Play Store.